Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, first of all, let me repeat, since it's been a long meeting, we may have forgotten how serious the problem is in Oklahoma. We have, we're actually third in the number of bridges, only behind Texas and California. A lot of people don't realize that, and the state of ill repair is about the worst in the nation. Secondly, I don't like to have in these discussions bring in political things, talking about how much you spend in Iraq or the war on terror and all that. We have a problem. I'm ranked usually as the most conservative member of the United States Senate. And yet I'm a big spender in some areas. One is national defense, but the other clearly is infrastructure. And I'd like to remind, I know that Mr. Ridley knows this, that when I was the author, at that time Republicans were a majority, I authored the 05 Transportation Reauthorization Bill and characterized it as the largest authorization, non-military authorization bill in this nation's history. I think it was. But I also said it was inadequate. It wasn't enough. And it just barely maintained what we have today, and it didn't take care of this crisis that's out there that everybody knows is there. And that's why this should not be a partisan discussion. We need to spend more money on infrastructure. It's a crisis. We recognize that. Mr. Ridley, you and I have talked several times the last few days. But could you kind of recount for my colleagues and for the record what you've done in Oklahoma since last Friday to manage this highway finance trust fund crisis?
On Monday, Senator, we had our Transportation Commission, and we had a little over $80 million worth of projects that we had open bids just 2 weeks before that was going to be taken to the Commission for approval. One of those, quite frankly, is a $40 million project on a $500 million bridge that we're replacing in Oklahoma City that is structurally deficient, has 250 fracture critical members on it. It is one that certainly needs to be replaced. But we had to tell the Commission, or ask the Commission, to defer that letting until the crisis here in the trust fund is solved. We also suspended all right-of-way acquisition for any of our projects, and depending on what takes place, I inform the Commission, depending on what takes place with the trust fund over the next few days, we may suspend work on construction projects, have to because of the cash flow of the reimbursement of the billing from the federal trust fund.
Yeah, well, it is, and you've done a good job of it. And I assume that your counterparts in other states, you've had communications with them, and the same thing is happening there.
That's correct.
In most states.
That's correct. All states are different in their approach. We rely, 85% of our construction program currently is federal funds. Consequently, any disruption in making payments by the trust fund will have a dramatic effect on our cash flow.
And we've talked also, Mr. Ridley, about the upcoming 09 reauthorization bill. And I've mentioned to you that some of this concern that's out there that money is not going all to surface transportation. It's been, in fact, I've seen this in the last 22 years that I've been on both the House committee and then the Senate committee, that it goes to other areas. In one of our meetings preparing that we've had here with Senator Boxer, preparing for the 09 reauthorization bill, we've talked about funding mechanisms and trying to isolate these things to have each one pay for its own. We're trying to address this, but it is a crisis that's out there. Now, Mr. Krieger, I'm going to ask you, but I want to ask Mr. Ridley first. It's my understanding, and I'm not sure about Oklahoma, but in many states, money is indeed transferred out of the bridge account. And one reason for that, as I said in my opening statement when Mr. Oberstart was here, is that there's so much red tape in there that they can actually use that money to repair and to rebuild bridges in another account that doesn't have the same red tape and maybe get more for the dollars. Would you think either Oklahoma or some other states are using this rationale?
Absolutely, Senator. The problem with using the money in the bridge account, because of the guidance, if you will, by the federal government, makes it extremely difficult to use those monies for bridge rehabilitation at times. But let me give you an example, Senator, that you're very familiar with. Oklahoma, not unlike Minnesota, had a bridge tragedy itself in 2002. Bridge was knocked down and not collapsed. We started immediately to put a plan in place to rebuild that bridge. Federal Highways told us that we could not use bridge funds to replace that bridge because the last inspection of it had it rating as an 80. And not until we had some calls from your office and some others was the decision made that yes, we could. We were going to have to remove money out of our bridge program into the NHS in order to be able to rebuild the bridge back, rather than just use the money out of the bridge program, would certainly seem somewhat foolish with us.
Yeah, and I recall being there with Secretary Peters the day after this and with you, and she recognized that, and that's one of the reasons that we did it the way we did it, and it was, and I applaud you for getting that done. And by the way, that job, I don't have, I'm sure you have the numbers on this, but it was done like in 2/3 of the time that they thought it was going to be done. It was so similar to the tragedy that took place between Port Isabel, Texas and South Padre Island when just a few weeks before when it was rammed by a barge. So you really performed well. But I think that's a good way of putting it.